Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and I am here with my June wrap-up and Q2 goals review, or goals check-in. So, if you've never seen my wrap-ups before, I've kind of developed a formula for it, and I go through some stats and the books that I read. And once I go through that, I'll go back to my yearly goals I set, and we'll check in and see how I'm doing. So, how did June go? In June, I read 14 books, which is pretty good. I usually end up reading fewer books during the summer because I participate in the Big Book Summer Challenge, and big books take longer to read. So that's why I have a little bit fewer books. Okay, and then I did DNF one book. It was actually right here. I can still show you. It was The English Wife by Lauren Willig, and that's all I'm going to say about that one. Whoops. My average rating for the month was 3.8, which is like between a B plus and an A, so that's pretty good. And let's break down by format the books that I read. So of the 14 books that I read, 8 were in print. Sorry, my watch buzzed. 8 were in print, 3 were ebooks, 2 were audiobooks, and 1 was a multiple or a tandem read, which meant I read it and I listened to it, so I did 2 different formats. And let me go through the genres that I read. So my little spiel, I do not consider classic to be a genre, but I do note when I read a classic. So I had 2 classics this month. However, they're going to be reflected in the genre numbers, just saying that 2 of the books I read were classics. I read 1 contemporary fiction. I read 1 historical fiction, which doesn't sound much, especially since this was the Read Historical Fiction month, or in my case, the first month of it. But I will get to that in a moment. It's not as dire as it seems. 1 horror novel, 2 magical realism books, 2 mystery novels, 1 current event / politics, 1 nonfiction history book, 3 memoirs / biographies, 1 nature science book, and 1 play, which was a comedy. Now, I will go through the books that I read this month by grade. However, there are 3 books that I read this month that are, did I read them this month? There are a couple books I read this month that are not included. No, I did read them all this month. And they are booktube prize books. So if I said I read 14 books and then there's only 11 that I talk about, that's why. If you want to know what I thought about the booktube books that I read, you need to tune in on August 1st. I'll have a video up with my thoughts on them. So, book by grade. My lowest grade, I give my books a letter grade like in school. And then they do have a star number that they correspond to, but I think of it in terms of letter grades. It just makes more sense to me than star ratings. So, a C to me is 2 stars. And I had 1 book that was a C, and that was Greta and Valdin by Rebecca K. Reilly. It just was told, I'm too old for that book. I found it a little annoying, and yeah, I'm a grumpy old person. What can I say? That book was not for me. I had 1 book that got a B, and that is my tandem read, Love's Labour's Lost by William Shakespeare. Not a bad play, not a great play. It's one that honestly, the writing didn't age well, in that probably a lot of humor has been lost to the ages, but a good production can probably bring a lot of humor to it with physical performance. So there you go. Love's Labour's Lost. So that means all my books were B plus or above. So B plus, I had 1 book that was a B plus. And this was Auntie, Poldi and the Sicilian Lions by Mario Giordano. This is a cozy mystery, which I'm not a cozy mystery person, but this was a cozy mystery about a 60-year-old German lady who moves to Sicily to drink herself to death, but ends up solving murders. Not literature, not great literature, but it was fun. It was fun and it was delightful, and it was another reason for me to go back to Sicily in my books. So I had 5 books that I gave an A to. The first one was Dissolution by C.J. Sansom. This is the first in the Shardlake series. Matthew Shardlake, I gotta check this out here. Is he Matthew or Michael Shardlake? Matthew Shardlake. Is a lawyer in Tudor England, and he is sent to solve a murder because a colleague of his had been sent to a monastery. Dissolution refers to the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII. So a colleague of his had been sent to a monastery to convince them to dissolve. and he was murdered. And so Shardlake's boss, Thomas Cromwell, decides to send Shardlake over to figure out what happened. So that's what this one was. It was a very good mystery. Strong. I had problems with the actual physical book. This looks like trade paperback, but it's actually mass market, and I don't like that, which is why I'm not keeping the book, because I don't like mass market paperbacks. But that has nothing to do with the novel itself. And then the next one I gave 4 stars to was this essay collection, Upstream by Mary Oliver. I really enjoyed this. Mary Oliver is such a wonderful writer, and this is essays, not poetry, although she has a very poetic prose. The only reason why this wasn't an A+ for me is there's a section in the middle that doesn't seem to fit. It's like where she talks about poets, which is great. It was entertaining. Doesn't fit with the rest of the book. And it's things, that's just a little pet peeve of mine. So it got an A instead of an A+. After that, I had a buddy read that I did, and this was The Wives by Simone Gorrindo. This is a memoir of a woman who was an army wife. Actually is an army wife. Her husband is still in the army. Her husband joined the army in his mid-20s, so not when he was right out of high school. And so she had already started a life in New York City and then uprooted her and moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, and had to adjust to army life. I did this as a buddy read with Kim at Kim's Book Life and Angela at Andy Hart's Books, which was fantastic because they are both former army wives. So I got to hear their experiences and their stories. It was a wonderful experience. The reason this is an A and not an A+ for me, it was a 5-star actually for both of them, but for me, the reason it's just an A is that I have a pet peeve with some memoirs where the authors aren't as self-aware as I would like them to be, and Gorrindo did fall into that trap from time to time. There were times where she pulled herself out of it, but then she fell back in, so it was a pet peeve of mine, but it was still a really strong book and worth the read. And then my next one was O Pioneers by Willa Cather, which I group read with people on my Discord. You are free to join at any time. Information down below. So I had read Death Comes for the Archbishop earlier this year and loved it. 5-star book. So I wanted to read more Cather, and so we decided to do O Pioneers, and I liked it. It wasn't as good as Death Comes for the Archbishop. I felt that it was a little unfocused. I wasn't quite sure what the book was supposed to be about. Like, what was the focus of the book? That was my issue with this book. But the writing was beautiful. The sense of place was strong. The characters were interesting. All that. I gave it an A. And then finally, I have a picture book. Actually, that's not included on there. I don't know what I put this in. I think under magical realism. But I have In the Night Kitchen by Maurice Sendak. I, for a challenge I'm in, had to read a book that has been challenged or banned in the state of Oregon. As far as I can tell, there are only 2 books currently banned by school districts in the state of Oregon. In the Canby School District, they have banned Lolita. And in Southern Oregon, they have banned The Handmaid's Tale. I've already read Lolita and The Handmaid's Tale, so I found a list of other books that had been banned. And I don't have a lot of time to read because I have a lot of other books. So I chose a picture book, and it was either between this or Curious George. Curious George, by the way, was banned because it encouraged children to misbehave. This one was banned because of some anatomically correct illustrations. It had penises. So it was an interesting story. It's Maurice Sendak, who's a little strange anyway. Like, if I had read this to my kids when they were little, they probably wouldn't have understood it. Like, it wouldn't have appealed to them. That's just not the sort of book they liked. But it's still an interesting book, and it has Sendak's illustrations in all their glory. And yeah, this has been challenged in the state of Oregon, so cross that one off my list. So now I had one book that I gave an A+ to, and this is a short story collection. I don't normally give A+ to short story collections, but this one earned it, and that is Normal Rules Don't Apply by Kate Atkinson. This is another magical realism book. Short stories intertwined loosely. Has kind of a feel of grown-up fairy tales. I really enjoyed it. It's trippy. It's not for everybody, but it was for me. And yeah, so this one was really good, and it has encouraged me to read more Kate Atkinson. Okay, now those up to A+. Now, if a book is even better than an A+, that's when it gets 5 stars for me. I rarely give 5 stars, although I've given out, I think, 10 this year. And I gave out 5 all of last year, and so far I've given out 10. So apparently I'm giving out more 5 stars, or I'm just getting better at choosing books. But have 2 5-star books this month, which is great. The first one, also a buddy read, and it has taken the award, for the least surprising 5-star rating of all time for me. Know My Name by Chanel Miller. We all know what this is about. Chanel Miller was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner in 2016-ish. Anyway, this is her memoir. And when I talked about the wives, and I said that my pet peeve is, memoirists who tend not to be self-aware, Chanel Miller most certainly does not fall into that category. And I would have actually given her grace had she fallen into it, because this is a really traumatic experience she went through. And she's very self-aware, and she's an incredibly good writer. This is a story that this is a novel, not a novel. This is a memoir. This is a memoir that I think everybody should read. So if you haven't, you should. And then my second 5-star book for the month was really surprising. I did not think this would be a 5-star book. And this is Red Rabbit by Alex Grecian. This is a horror/Western novel. And it is a horror novel and a Western novel. It is not a horror with Western elements or a Western with horror elements. It is very much in both genres. And it succeeds on both. Trigger warnings abound in this one. So be sure, if you are sensitive to things that you would kind of expect to find in either horror or Westerns, check it out. Check out the trigger warnings on Storygraph. This is a bloody book. It is, but it's so good at what it does. I could not put this book down. There is a sequel coming out. So excited. Do not read the blurb for the sequel, because it will tell you the ending of this book. That's, unfortunate, but there you go. So those are most of the books that I read this month. So let me go through the read-alongs and events that I participated in this month. So June, actually I didn't put one on here, and one is Pride. So Greta and Valdin I actually read for Pride because both the author is LGBTQ, and both the title characters and some other characters in the book are as well. So that was my Pride book. It was also for a book club. I forgot to put that on my list, but we'll go to the next one, which is Jude on the Range. I cast a wider net for Jude on the Range than some people. I like Pioneer stories, and so obviously, Oh Pioneers was a Jude on the Range book, but also Red Rabbit, which is actually why I chose to read this in June, was for Jude on the Range, and it just was so fantastic. I was kind of disappointed that I finished it on June 29th, so I couldn't tell more people to read it for Jude on the Range. Then, of course, there was Big Book Summer. This goes all summer, and it's basically read books 400 pages or more, and I finished 3 books of 400 pages or more. The first one was over here. Dissolution by C.J. Sansom. This is, I have a list here. Oh, sorry. This is 439 pages. And then The Wives was exactly 400 pages. And Red Rabbit is doing a lot of work for me. This was 454 pages, but it read really quickly. And then we have Read Historical Fiction 2024, which is the month of June. The design was for the month of June, but I personally am focusing on it for all summer. So Big Book Summer and Historical Fiction Summer for me. Now, before I said I only had one book that was historical fiction, that's because I read books that are more than one genre, and I had to kind of qualify them. So Dissolution fell again. Dissolution, which was categorized in my count as a mystery, is also historical fiction. Oh Pioneers was the historical fiction that was counted in there. And Red Rabbit, again, the perfect book for June, is also historical fiction. So I had 3 historical fiction novels that would count for that. Now, Shelley has a bingo card, and I need to fill it out. I don't have bingo because I only have 3 cards. I had one more book that I finished on July 1st. It was another big book too, that would count for it, but you're gonna have to wait a month, or actually probably like a week. Probably you've already heard about it because it was probably in a wrap-up. But anyway, I am continuing to do Read Historical Fiction 2024 all summer, so there you go. And group buddy reads. I have already talked about these, but they were Know My Name, The Wives, and Oh Pioneers. So let me get into my TBR stats. So as you know, I have, when I get to my yearly goals, one is to have like one less book, at least one less book in my own TBR than I had on January 1st. And it's not going well. But that was the first one. So my reading goal for this year is 165 books. And that's just kind of a number that I think is what I would do if I read at the pace I want to read. I'm not challenging myself to read more. That's to kind of keep me on track. But I'm at currently 89 books, or I was at 89 books as of June 30th. And that's 7 books ahead of schedule. So there you go. But that will slow down a bit over the summer. As I said, I read fewer books during the summer because I read bigger books. Now, my own TBR count was at 850, which, this is the good news, it's down from last month, down by 3 books from last month. That's the good news. The bad news, it's still up 21 overall. So to make my goal, I need to read a lot of my own books or maybe do some unhauling, which is always a possibility. I unhauled at least 1 book this month, but that's always a possibility. So do some unhauling to meet that goal, but we'll see. Now, if we break down my own TBR, I don't really worry about audiobooks. They're included in that greater number, but I'm not really tracking where I am with them. I generally hold pretty even on them. At this point, I'm really only getting audiobooks if I know I'm going to immediately listen to them. So, but print, I have 281 books that I own that I have not read, which is down 2 from last month. Right direction, but it is still up. Oh my God, it's still up 49 overall. Hence my new mindful book buying philosophy. Now for ebooks, I have 498, which is down 1 from last month, which isn't unusual for it to be down only 1 because a lot of the ebooks I read are from the library. But I'm down 28 overall, so that's really good. And then if you break that down even further, 130 of them are on my Kindle, which is no change from last month, but it is down 26 overall because I did an unhaul a couple months ago. And then on my Kobo, it's at 369, which is down 1 from last month and down 2 overall. So there are some movements in the right direction. So that is my monthly wrap up. But let me jump over to my yearly goals. The first one we've already talked about, which is, the first 2 we've already talked about. One was read 165 books. Again, I chose that number based on what I think I would read just at my normal pace. And the other one is to have my own TBR to be less than it was actually on December 31st of 2023. So I want it to be 828 books or less. That's my goal. Which means that I'm actually 22 up. I'm not sure. There's some math issue here, but 828 is the magic number because I'm currently at 850. So we already covered those 2. Now the next one is to have 35% of the books that I read be by own voices authors. So that is an author who is in a marginalized group writing about their own experience or writing about an experience in that marginalized group. And I am currently at 27, which is a little bit lower. It is up from 25.6, so it's getting better. But it's still, I just need to concentrate on it. That's okay. We'll do it. And then my next goal is to have at least 15% of my reading being nonfiction. And I'm at 28.1%. So I'm doing really well on that one. And a lot of that goes to the BookTube prize because I'm reading for nonfiction. But I also read a lot of memoirs and history. So it works in pretty well. I might have to, if I choose to have a goal like that for 2025, I'm going to have to up the number. And then goal number 5 was less than 50% of my books being written by authors from the United States. I'm currently at 40.4%, so I'm still below that 50% mark, so that's good. Thank you, UK and Ireland. I probably should cast that net a little wider, but we're doing it. Now I have changed the wording of this next goal. It was originally written, read 75% of my 2024 books of the month books within 3 months of receiving them. And I realized that's just a little hard to track. So I changed it a little bit. It's still basically the same goal, but it's read 75% of the books I get through book of the month in 2024. However, I'm not doing well with that because I'm at 30%. I have received 10 books so far this year from Book of the Month. I had a couple months where I did some add-ons, and I have currently read 3. Now, the other thing is, though, that I have read some Book of the Month books, but they weren't ones that I got in 2024. So I need to focus a little bit more on the current books that I am getting from them and really thinking about, you know, do I want to read this right now? I will tell you, the book I got for July is one I will be reading very, very quickly, and that is God of the Woods. That one I'm reading. No, we don't have to worry about July. It's taken care of. The goal number 7, I actually abandoned, and that was cut my NetGalley queue by at least 10 books. I have broken up with NetGalley. I've deleted my digital arcs from them. I still plan to read those books. I have a list of what they were, but I'm not going to read them through NetGalley. NetGalley and I don't get along. It's not good for me. It's not good for me to have NetGalley, so I don't use NetGalley. So that goal is no more. Goal number 8 was read 300 new to me short stories. So far this year, I have read 121 new to me short stories. So I'm behind by 29. I should be at 150 at this point. But I have kind of added some more short stories into my reading. So I have every confidence that I'll be able to catch that up by the end of the year. I'm not worried about that one. Number 9 was one that I had completed in Q1, and that is read or listen to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This was my non-Moby Dick white whale of a book. I was supposed to read it in high school, and I didn't. And I have felt guilty about it ever since, and I did read that in March, and I did not like it. However, I loved James, but I don't like Huckleberry Finn. Read Tom Sawyer and said it's better. And then my last goal is to reread, actually, because I've already read them all, reread at least one book by Jane Austen. So my relationship with Jane Austen has not been a good one, but I have only read her books in academic settings. Sense and Sensibility was a little weird. Like, I was never assigned Sense and Sensibility, but I read it during my astronomy lecture, so still academic setting. Just not for that book. But Jane Austen has not worked for me in the past, and I have read all of her major novels. And I think I've read Sandition too, but I've not liked any of them. But I decided, you know, I'm going to try reading her for fun to see what I think. This goal, not complete, but in process. I am currently reading Persuasion for Jane Austen July, and I am like, I don't know how far I actually am in. I've read the first 9 chapters. My ebook says it's 33%, but that includes like the introduction and the pre-book information in that, and I have the Penguin one, so there's a lot. My initial thoughts, I'll give you a little in on this, is that I'm doing better with the writing style. I am doing much better with Jane Austen's writing style. I've accepted the fact that she's not a Bronte. So I'm doing better with her writing style. I am running into a little bit of frustration in that I have with a lot of romance novels, which is if these two people would just talk to each other, things would be a lot better. I know I can't really hold that to Jane Austen as much because she kind of gets a pass because she kind of invented that. But yeah, I'm definitely doing better with Persuasion than I did the first time I read it. And I am buddy reading it with my in real life friend, Kim. So I will have thoughts on that. We're going to read it over 7 to 8 days. I say it's a 7-day schedule, but the 4th of July is in there. So we'll say 7 to 8 days. So that one will definitely be done by the end of Q3. And yeah, so that's June, and that is Q2. There you go. Now we're on to, as I said, July, August, more big books, more historical fiction. Then we have spooky season and Remember December and all those fun things. So yeah. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for, I've been trying to keep my videos a little bit shorter, but I don't think this one could have been much shorter just by the nature of what it is. So I thank you for hanging in with me if you hung in this entire time. Like, subscribe, feel free to join my Discord. We do buddy reads, especially if you want to buddy read some Cather, because there is more Willa Cather coming. And of course, Shakespeare. But that's the information down below. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.